Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Let's be real. Sometimes a little splash of reality and Merlot is the only language some people understand. Today in the rLounge, we raise our glasses to those rare, satisfying moments when subtlety fails and bold actions speak louder than words ever could. Sister-in-law wore white to my wedding and flirted with my husband. She left in tears and an Uber pool. My husband and I have been together for 4 years before we got married. We had a beautiful medium-sized wedding with about 120 guests. But what should have been the happiest day of our lives turned into a nightmare thanks to my sister-in-law. Let me give you some background. My sister-in-law, 32, has always been difficult. From the moment I started dating her brother, 29, she made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for him. At first, I tried to win her over. I invited her to lunch, asked her about her interests, and genuinely tried to form a connection. But every attempt was met with passive-aggressive comments about my appearance, my relationship with her brother, or some other aspect of my life that she deemed inadequate. "I'm surprised my brother is into someone who is so casual," she once said while looking me up and down at a family dinner. "He usually goes for women who put more effort into their appearance." When we announced our engagement, she plastered on a fake smile and hugged her brother tightly. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered to him, loud enough for me to hear. "It's only been 4 years." I tried to brush it off. My fiancé assured me that his sister was just being protective and would warm up to me eventually. But as we began planning our wedding, her behavior only got worse. She insisted on being involved in every decision despite not being in the bridal party. I had asked my 2 closest friends and my cousin to be my bridesmaids, and she acted personally offended that she wasn't included. When I explained that I wanted my closest friends to be by my side, she sniffed and said, "I thought I'd be standing next to my brother on his special day. We've always been so close." The wedding planning became a battleground. She criticized our venue choice. "Don't you think it's a bit basic?" Our color scheme. "Navy blue for a summer wedding?" And even the flowers I'd selected. "Roses are so cliche, don't you think?" My fiancé tried to mediate, but he never fully stood up to her. "That's just how she is," became his mantra, and it drove me crazy. Things came to a head when I went wedding dress shopping with my mom and bridesmaids. Somehow, my sister-in-law found out where we were going and showed up uninvited. She sat in the corner with a sour expression as I tried on dresses, making little comments just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe something more slimming would be better for your figure," she suggested when I tried on a fitted mermaid style. "And perhaps less revealing. It's a wedding, not a nightclub." My maid of honor finally had had enough and asked her to leave if she couldn't be supportive. Sister-in-law made a huge scene, crying about how she was just trying to help and how I was turning her brother against her. The boutique staff looked mortified, and I was humiliated. When I told my fiancé about it later, he sighed and said he talked to her. But whatever conversation they had didn't change anything. If anything, her behavior escalated. At our engagement dinner, she showed up wearing a white cocktail dress. White! To an engagement dinner. And throughout the evening, she kept finding reasons to touch my fiancé's arm, laugh too loudly at his jokes, and sit unnecessarily close to him. It was uncomfortable for everyone, but no one said anything. After dinner, I pulled her aside and asked her directly why she was wearing white to an engagement dinner and being so touchy with her brother. "I'm just being friendly," she said with a cold smile. "Maybe you're just insecure about your relationship if you see me as a threat." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. A few weeks later, I was using my fiancé's phone to look up a restaurant we were considering for the rehearsal dinner when a text from his sister popped up. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened their conversation. She had been texting him daily with wedding suggestions, but many messages crossed the line of appropriate sibling communication. "Remember when we used to talk about your future wedding when we were younger? I always imagined I'd be the most important woman there, besides your bride. I miss being your number one girl." When I confronted my fiancé about these messages, he admitted that his sister had always been possessive, but insisted it was just how she is, and that I was reading too much into it. We had our first major fight that night, with me insisting he needed to set boundaries and him accusing me of trying to come between him and his family. Eventually, he agreed to speak with her about toning down her behavior, but I could tell he was only doing it to appease me, not because he truly saw an issue. My bridal shower was another disaster. My friends had organized a lovely afternoon with games, gifts, and champagne. Sister-in-law arrived late, making a grand entrance that interrupted the gift opening. She insisted on giving me her special gift right away, which turned out to be lingerie with a card saying, "To help you keep his attention." The implication being that I wouldn't be able to hold on to him without sexual enticement. She then made an impromptu speech about how surprised she was that her brother had chosen me and how she never thought he'd settle down with someone so different from what he usually likes. My friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, and my mother looked like she wanted to throw her mimosa in sister-in-law's face. When I sent out wedding invitations, sister-in-law called me demanding to bring a +1 who wasn't on our guest list, some guy she'd been on 2 dates with. When I explained that we were only giving +1s to couples in established relationships, she threatened to make a scene at the wedding. This time, my fiancé finally stood up to her, telling her firmly that she needed to respect our decisions for our wedding day. She backed down temporarily, but a couple weeks later, I overheard her at a family gathering saying that our marriage wouldn't last a year and that her brother was settling and still had feelings for his ex. When confronted by my fiancé, she broke down crying, claimed she was just worried about him and wanted to make sure he was making the right decision. His parents pressured us to make peace for the sake of family harmony. I reluctantly agreed to be civil, but I made it clear to my fiancé that I wouldn't tolerate any more disrespect. The rehearsal dinner should have been a joyful prelude to our wedding. Instead, sister-in-law showed up in a revealing red dress that was completely inappropriate for the occasion and spent the entire evening trying to monopolize conversations and attention. She gave an impromptu speech about her special bond with her brother that made everyone uncomfortable with its intensity. My fiancé finally pulled her aside and warned her to behave herself at the wedding. She nodded tearfully and promised to be on her best behavior. I didn't believe her for a second. I was right not to. On our wedding day, while I was getting ready with my bridesmaids at the hotel, I received a text from one of my bridesmaids who had arrived early at the venue. Attached was a photo of my sister-in-law arriving at the church wearing a floor-length white gown. A white gown! To my wedding. I nearly threw my phone across the room. My mother-in-law called moments later, claiming sister-in-law didn't realize the dress was inappropriate and asking if I could just let it go for one day. I handed the phone to my maid of honor because I couldn't trust myself to speak civilly. My fiancé called next, promising he would handle the situation. I tried to focus on getting ready and not letting this ruin our day, but I was seething inside. When we arrived at the venue, I learned that sister-in-law had refused to change, claiming she had nothing else to wear, as if she didn't know white was off limits for anyone but the bride. My wedding coordinator, an absolute saint, stationed 2 of my bridesmaids at the entrance to block sister-in-law from entering the ceremony. Sister-in-law created a scene in the lobby, crying loudly after being excluded from her brother's special day and trying to guilt family members into intervening on her behalf. Thankfully, no one did, and the ceremony proceeded without her. She waited in the lobby, playing the victim. The ceremony was beautiful despite the drama, and for a brief time, I forgot about sister-in-law's antics. That piece lasted until the reception, when she waltzed in, still wearing the white dress, causing whispers among the guests who hadn't witnessed the pre-ceremony drama. What happened next will go down in family legend. My maid of honor, carrying a glass of red wine, accidentally bumped into sister-in-law, spilling the entire contents down the front of her white dress. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Sister-in-law screamed like she'd been stabbed, drawing attention from every corner of the reception. My maid of honor apologized profusely, offering napkins and suggesting sister-in-law might want to change clothes now. Instead of leaving to change, sister-in-law ran to the bathroom and attempted to clean the dress, making the stain worse and turning the white fabric a mottled pink. She returned to the reception with her ruined dress, mascara streaked down her face from crying, looking like an extra from a horror movie. But even this didn't stop her behavior. During our first dance as husband and wife, sister-in-law actually cut in and tried to dance with my husband. He firmly refused, escorted her back to her table while she pouted like a child. After the rejection, she began drinking heavily, becoming increasingly loud and disruptive. After my father, the best man, and maid of honor had given their lovely toasts, sister-in-law grabbed the microphone uninvited. Slurring her words, she began a rambling speech about how no woman will ever be good enough for her brother and their special connection that can't be broken by marriage. As my husband approached to take the microphone away, she attempted to kiss him on the lips. He turned his head, so she caught his cheek, but the intent was clear to everyone watching. The room went silent. That was it. I'd had enough. I walked over, took the microphone, and finally said what I'd been holding back for years. I've tried to be understanding of your attachment to your brother. I've overlooked your rude comments, your inappropriate texts, and your constant attempts to undermine our relationship. But showing up to my wedding in a white dress and trying to kiss my husband crosses every line of decency. You need to leave now. My husband stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder in solidarity. She's right. You need to go. Sister-in-law's face crumpled. She burst into tears, wailing about being attacked and humiliated in front of everyone. She looked around for support, but even her parents were shaking their heads in disappointment. "This is all her fault," she shrieked, pointing at me. "She's turned all of you against me. She's stolen my brother." My father-in-law finally stood up. "That's enough. You've embarrassed yourself in this family. We're not driving you home. You can find your own way back." Our wedding coordinator called an Uber for sister-in-law, and not even a regular Uber, an Uber pool. The image of sister-in-law leaving our wedding in tears, mascara streaked down her face, and a wine-stained white dress, sharing a ride with random strangers, is one I'll cherish forever. The rest of the reception was actually wonderful once she was gone. People relaxed, the dancing resumed, and my husband and I were able to enjoy our special day. Later that night, as we collapsed into our hotel room, my husband apologized for not taking my concerns about his sister more seriously from the beginning. "I always knew she was possessive, but I never thought she'd go this far. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I appreciated his apology, but I was worried that this wasn't the end of sister-in-law's antics. Her behavior has escalated from passive-aggressive comments to full-blown inappropriate actions in public. What would she do next? The next morning, we left for our honeymoon. It was exactly what we needed after the stress of the wedding. What's really unsettling, though, is that your husband didn't put his foot down sooner. How do you watch your sister show up in white, make a scene, and even try to kiss you at your own wedding, and say nothing? That silence almost feels like permission. Hopefully, he's finally grown a spine, because you deserve better than being overshadowed by a family member who clearly missed the boundaries class. Update. It's been 2 weeks since my husband and I returned from a honeymoon, and I wish I could say things have calmed down with my sister-in-law. But they've only gotten worse. First, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post with advice and support. I didn't expect the situation to blow up the way it did. When we landed back home, my husband turned on his phone to find 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages from his sister. My phone had a similar bombardment. We ignored them all and took a taxi home. Exhausted from the flight and not ready to deal with family drama. We should have known it wouldn't be that easy to escape. The next morning, my sister-in-law showed up unannounced at our apartment, pounding on the door and demanding to speak to her brother alone. When my husband opened the door with me beside him, her face darkened. She insisted on talking to him privately, trying to look past me. He replied firmly that anything she had to say could be said in front of me. She cried out that I was controlling him and isolating him from his family, saying this wasn't like him. My husband's patience, already thin, snapped completely. "The only person trying to control me is you. You need to leave and don't come back until you're ready to sincerely apologize to both of us for your behavior." He closed the door on her shocked face, and we could hear her sobbing dramatically in the hallway before finally leaving. We thought that would be the end of it, at least for a while. We were wrong. A few days later, I was scrolling through social media when I noticed a sister-in-law had posted photos from our wedding. She carefully cropped and edited them to make it appear as though she was part of the wedding party, standing next to her brother in several shots. The caption read, "Honored to stand by my brother on his special day as he begins his new chapter. #family first, #sibling love." The comment section was filled with her friends criticizing me for being jealous of the siblings' bond and praising sister-in-law for being such a supportive sister, despite the tension from the bride. It was a complete rewriting of what had actually happened. I showed my husband, who immediately called his sister and demanded she take down the misleading posts. She refused, claiming they were her memories too, and she had a right to share them. He threatened to report the photos to the social media platform if she didn't remove them. She eventually did. This situation came to a head at a family dinner in my in-laws' home. Sister-in-law arriving, acting as if nothing had happened, greeting everyone warmly while completely ignoring me. Whenever the wedding was mentioned, she would either change the subject or leave the room. My in-laws, clearly uncomfortable with the tension but unwilling to address it directly, enabled her behavior by also avoiding any mention of the wedding drama. After dinner, when my sister-in-law went to the bathroom, I quietly asked my mother-in-law why they were pretending nothing had happened. She whispered that they had just wanted peace in the family and that my sister-in-law had always been sensitive about her brother. I was stunned and pointed out that her wearing white to our wedding, trying to kiss my husband, and spreading lies about me online was not just sensitive but inappropriate and concerning. My father-in-law, overhearing, sighed and admitted her behavior was out of line, but said she was going through a rough time, and confronting her would make things worse. I realized their pattern of excusing her behavior was deeply ingrained, and they expected me to do the same. When my husband and I got home, we discussed boundaries. He agreed his parents' approach wasn't helping, and that we needed to be united in handling his sister. He acknowledged loving her, but recognized her behavior wasn't normal or healthy, and that he couldn't keep making excuses for her. The next day, I received a message from someone I didn't expect, sister-in-law's ex-boyfriend. He had seen her posts about the wedding and reached out to warn me. "I'm sorry to contact you out of the blue," his message read, "but I felt I should warn you about what you're dealing with. Her attachment to her brother was a major issue in our relationship. She would cancel our plans if he called, kept framed photos of them together by our bed, and became irrationally jealous of any woman in his life. When we broke up, she told me I was just a distraction until her brother came to his senses about who should be his priority. I thought she was just being dramatic, but after seeing her behavior at your wedding, I'm concerned for you both." I showed the message to my husband, who looked disturbed but not entirely surprised. He admitted that his sister has always been clingy, but said he didn't realize how it affected her relationships, adding that this was worse than he thought. This situation escalated further when sister-in-law began showing up at my husband's workplace with homemade lunches. At first, his colleagues thought it was sweet that his sister was bringing him food, but it quickly became uncomfortable as she would linger at his desk, touch his shoulder, and make possessive comments about taking care of my brother like I always have. At the third visit in 1 week, my husband's boss pulled him aside and asked him to address the situation, as it was disrupting the workplace. My husband was mortified and confronted his sister that evening. He told her over the phone that she couldn't keep showing up at his office because it was unprofessional and making everyone uncomfortable. She replied defensively that she was just being a good sister, as she'd always brought him lunch, and questioned why it was suddenly a problem, suggesting his wife was telling him to push her away. He responded that it had nothing to do with his wife and was about appropriate boundaries, which she clearly didn't understand. The call ended with her hanging up on him, followed by a barrage of texts about how he'd changed and was abandoning his family. At family birthday celebration, my sister-in-law announced with a huge smile that she was moving to our neighborhood to be closer to family, revealing she'd found an apartment in our complex. My heart sank as my in-laws congratulated her, ignoring my discomfort. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, signaling we'd handle it together. On the drive home, I expressed my frustration, calling her actions stalking and noting his parents' encouragement. He agreed grimly that her behavior had become concerning and that we needed to take more serious steps. Within a week of her move, sister-in-law began accidentally running into us everywhere, at the grocery store, at the gym, at restaurants with our friends. She would act surprised to see us, then invite herself along, claiming she was just trying to get to know the area. Our friends noticed her uncomfortable dynamic immediately. After one particularly awkward dinner where sister-in-law dominated the conversation and kept referring to inside jokes with my husband from their childhood, my friend pulled me aside in the bathroom. She said, "What's going on with your sister-in-law? The way she acts around your husband is off." I broke down and told her everything. It was actually a relief to have someone outside the family validate the sister-in-law's behavior wasn't normal, and I wasn't overreacting. The final straw came when I returned home early from running errands to find sister-in-law in our apartment. She had a spare key that my in-laws had given her for emergencies and claimed she was just dropping off a housewarming gift. But when I went into our bedroom later, I noticed things were slightly out of place. My jewelry box had been moved, and some of my clothes in the closet were rearranged. She'd been going through our things. My husband was furious when I told him this. He immediately called a locksmith to change the locks and confronted his parents about giving his sister a key without our permission. His mother weakly explained that his sister claimed she needed a key to water our plants during our honeymoon. My husband pointed out we'd been back for weeks and never asked her to do that, stressing his parents had no right to give her a key. His father defended the decision, saying families should have access to each other's homes. My husband firmly rejected this, stating that family respects boundaries, which none of them seemed to understand. The situation came to a head at a Halloween party hosted by one of our friends. We hadn't told sister-in-law about the party, but somehow she found out and showed up uninvited, wearing a costume that matched my husband's. He had dressed as a Viking, and she arrived as a female Viking warrior, claiming they always coordinate costumes as siblings. When our host politely asked why she was there, sister-in-law burst into tears and accused me of stealing her brother and turning him against his family. Several guests witnessed her meltdown, and our friend asked her to leave. On the way home, my husband was quiet for a long time before finally saying, "I think we need to talk to a lawyer about a restraining order." I was relieved he had suggested it first. We consulted with an attorney the following week, bringing documentation of all the incidents of boundary violations and harassment. We also made the decision to temporarily cut contact with my in-laws, who continued to enable sister-in-law's behavior despite multiple conversations about how inappropriate it was. The cease and desist letter was delivered to sister-in-law, and her reaction was predictably dramatic. She called my husband hysterically, crying about being legally threatened by family, and how could he do this to his own sister. My husband remained firm. This isn't a threat, it's a boundary. If you continue to harass us, show up uninvited, or spread lies about us online, there will be legal consequences. My in-laws called a family emergency meeting, insisting we all needed to talk this out and forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. My husband and I reluctantly agreed to attend, but we came prepared. At the meeting, my in-laws tried to pressure us into dropping the cease and desist and making peace with sister-in-law. When his mother tried to dismiss sister-in-law's behavior as just her way of showing she cares, I pulled out my phone and showed them the evidence I'd been collecting. Screenshots of her manipulated social media posts, photos of her showing up uninvited at our apartment, text messages from her to my husband that crossed appropriate sibling boundaries, and statements from friends and colleagues who had witnessed her behavior. This isn't caring, I said. This is obsessive and unhealthy. And by making excuses for her, you're enabling behavior that needs professional help. After the meeting, sister-in-law seemed to back off. We had no contact with her for 5 days, giving us hope that the situation was finally improving. Then I received an anonymous package in the mail containing cut-up wedding photos, specifically photos of me and my husband that had been sliced to separate us. There was no note, but we didn't need one to know who had sent it. We checked our building security footage, and sure enough, there was sister-in-law dropping off the package herself. We added this incident to our documentation and prepared for the final confrontation, which came at my in-laws' Thanksgiving dinner. We had debated not attending, but my husband wanted to give his family one last chance to address the situation appropriately. Sister-in-law arrived acting completely normal, as if the past months of harassment had never happened. She made polite small talk and avoided any mention of our wedding or relationship. Just when we thought we might get through the meal without incident, she raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "and to the temporary relationships that come and go, but never break the bonds of blood." My husband put down his fork. "What exactly do you mean by temporary relationships, sis?" And that's when she finally lost it completely. The facade cracked, and all the obsession and resentment came pouring out. "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "She'll never understand you like I do. We've been together our whole lives. She's just some woman you've known for a few years who tricked you into marriage." The table fell silent as sister-in-law continued her rant, revealing feelings that went far beyond normal sibling attachment. She talked about how they were meant to be together forever, and how I had stolen what was rightfully hers. My father-in-law stood up and declared that the situation wasn't right, his voice shaking, acknowledging what everyone knew. My mother-in-law began to cry, admitting they should have addressed it years ago, having thought it was just a phase that their daughter would outgrow. The next day, my in-laws called us to apologize. My father-in-law admitted the sister-in-law had been in therapy as a teenager for attachment issues, but had stopped going when she turned 18, claiming she was fixed. They had convinced themselves that her behavior was normal sibling closeness rather than confronting the uncomfortable reality. With the family finally acknowledging the severity of the situation, we filed for a restraining order. It wasn't how any of us wanted things to turn out, but it was clear that sister-in-law needed professional help. Your sister-in-law's behavior has clearly crossed every imaginable line, from showing up unannounced at your home to going through your personal belongings. No one should have to feel unsafe or constantly on edge in their own home because a family member can't respect boundaries. It's good you guys finally drew some serious boundaries and got legal involved because it sounds like nothing else was working. Hopefully, with the restraining order and her getting some professional help, things can finally calm down. It sounds like you did everything you could to be patient and understanding, but this was beyond anyone's tolerance. What would you do? And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time, and please put your chair back where you found it.